So nobody chooses mental illness. It chose them. It was genetically predisposed. It was triggered by an environmental stressor that negatively altered their internal biochemistry, impairing the brain's ability to function, and it shows up externally in behavior. So, not once did my children ever come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, I want to try on this mental illness. I've heard about this. I've learned about this. I think it might be a good fit for me." They never chose it. It chose them. And so I didn't ever choose it. It chose us. And so it showed up in our family, and all of a sudden we had to learn, what is this? What's going on here? What's happening in our home? And as we walk that road and that path, it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult and very dark at times.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of interviewing Tony Cloud. He is a certified peer counselor, mental health coach, and he is an advocate for mental health and a public speaker. How you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Will.
Thank you. It was really great to get to meet you the other day. It was just like sitting there having a cup of coffee, being able to hear a little bit about your story. And it's really interesting to hear about the changes in your own life and how it is to be a foster dad to being an individual that's been advocating for people's health. You have a very interesting and unique perspective.
I do. We started out as adoptive parents to fraternal twins. We adopted them at the age of 2. They're now young adults. But as they were growing, developing, and maturing, it became apparent that they were living with mental health challenges. And as they developed further, those mental health challenges started to display themselves in more challenging ways. And so we have been walking the road of mental health challenges for many years now, both personally and then professionally. My wife and I, have been serving in the behavioral health field. Most recently, I served for nearly a decade in a total confinement facility, serving about 300 of the state's most challenging mental health cases. All of these individuals are deemed by the courts to be sexually violent predators, psychopathic personalities, live with a a real long history of justice involvement, mental illness, and substance abuse. And I had the opportunity to serve those individuals while confined with the goal of improving their overall well being, with the possibility of stepping down into a less restrictive environment where they might eventually reintegrate back into the community if possible.
It's always important to think about how does a step down look like for people. We have individuals that be more conservative about how are we interacting? How are they going to interact with the public? But realistically, when I started to look at prison systems before I started to understand more about mental health, a lot of these individuals are there because of adverse childhoods or other things that have changed their life and they're acting out. But, and I guess your perspective, do you believe that some of these prisons or penitentiaries have been there to help these individuals reform the way that they've been looking at their views and being able to want to connect back into society?
My experience, Will, working within a total confinement facility for nearly a decade, is that even those facilities that are dedicated, such as ours, to the mental health treatment of these individuals. We were specifically a total confinement facility for what is called civilly detained individuals. What that means is that at the end of their prison sentence, the state, through a forensic evaluation and process, has stepped forward and said, wait, we believe that based on a lot of information and data regarding yourself, you are still too dangerous to release back into the community. So, in a very controversial manner, this individual can be civilly detained for possible crimes that they might commit should they be released into the community. So they are indefinitely detained for further mental health treatment until progress is proven to the courts that they may qualify for a step down from a total confinement facility to still confined, but under a number of continued restrictions, supervisions, observations. And so that facility dedicated to the mental well being of these individuals, my experience and observation is that even though this individual is spending 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, every day of their life, they are confined. They spend very minimal amounts of time in mental health treatment. In fact, a civilly detained individual is not required to participate in mental health treatment. It is an option. So, of the detained population, not all of them participate voluntarily in mental health treatment. So, are these individuals getting the help that they need? Sadly, my observation within this single confinement facility was that about half the population is engaged in mental health treatment. And of those that are engaged to the fullest extent, they're really receiving a minimal amount of hours in actual therapeutic treatment. So I think that this reflects on the agency and the efforts of the facility that there is far more that could be done for those who are willing and wanting further treatment, but they're not getting as much help as the general public might believe that they are.
Hmm.
And furthermore, if I might add, just based on my own lived experience, is that individuals that are detained, say, within their state Department of Corrections, that is different from civil commitment. Department of Corrections detains individuals, many of whom are living with mental health challenges, and they do not receive mental health treatment. I know this firsthand. And so we have individuals that are housed in our um, confinement facilities. They are incarcerated in prisons and institutions of like kind. Um, but many of the corrections will say that we're here for the rehabilitation of people, but my lived experience is that that rehabilitation stops when that individual is been warehoused. They are held, they are detained, they are confined, but the resources made available to them are very limited. And so sadly, we're warehousing people more than we are actually helping to rehabilitate them.
Hmm. So I just want to get a perspective on the clientele. Is it predominantly men, or are they women, or are they both?
The specific facility I was serving within was predominantly a male population. There was one individual that was biologically a female, and there were less than five other individuals that were transgender that identified as female but were not biologically a female.
Did you, in your experience, did you notice a similar pattern between the people that you were working with as far as their childhood upbringing?
The individuals I was working with all had to meet specific criteria. And in the most basic way to explain that is that they had to have a history of sexual violence. Now, history of sexual violence is different from conviction. And so you can have a history of legal involvement without being convicted for all of that legal history. So the state looks for a history of sexual violence, a diagnosable mental illness, and extensive justice involvement, meaning they've got a track record of engaging with law enforcement over a period of time. And then that information, as well as a lot of other data, um, is laid up against an actuary where they say, hey, based on data and information, what we know, statistically speaking, this individual is more likely to commit sexually violent crime again if they should be released at this time. So they all have to meet that real basic criteria: diagnosable mental illness, extensive involvement with justice, and a history of sexual violence. So that's what got them into the facility that I was specifically in. Their story or lived experience varied, but if I were to broad brush it, I would say that most of these individuals were victims themselves. Now, let me be quick to give the caveat there that a person being a victim does not give them permission to make victims. So while adverse childhood experiences, trauma, abuse, neglect are deep and profound and long lasting in their impact to individuals, it does not excuse an individual for making victims of other individuals. So they are still held responsible for their choices, decisions, and their actions.
I agree with that, and I believe it's called breaking the generational curse, and how they're able to rechange that link in the chain instead of keep poisoning the rest of the fruits that are around it. But so this will lead me to go back a few steps. What helped you, or what was the calling for you to become a certified peer?
My experience as a certified peer counselor really began in my own lived experience, which is essentially what a peer counselor is. They are someone with lived experience. More specifically, I am a certified peer counselor for family members. So I leverage my lived experience as an adoptive father to fraternal twins who are now young adults, both of whom are living with mental health challenges that range on the spectrum of severity. So I know what it's like to walk this road, to live a family life and the unique dynamic and challenges as a family member who has children in their life that are living with mental health challenges. So I leverage my lived experience to aid, to help, to support others. And so my desire to really reduce stigma and raise mental health awareness and mental health literacy is really born out of my own personal lived experience. It's not a path that I ever necessarily consciously chose. It really more or less chose us. And that's what mental health challenges do, is that no one chooses their mental illness. It chose them. Research tells us that mental health challenges arise out of, first of all, a genetic predisposition, that there is a genetic component where somewhere in the family history, somebody has had this mental health challenge. And many people don't know their family's health history, let alone their family's mental health history. And so, what research tells us, though, is that the familial history will show that there is a genetic link, there is a component hardwired into the DNA of individuals that predisposes them to developing mental health challenges. Now, the good news is that mental health challenges, it doesn't mean that they absolutely will develop. It's just that there's a higher possibility that they'll show up. So the question becomes, well, what makes them show up? What makes a mental health challenge actually percolate internally in the individual and eventually show itself. And that is stress. And stress is different to us all as individuals. What one finds stressful, another doesn't. But what is common between all of us is that stress changes our internal biochemistry. That alters our brain's function. The brain function shows up in our behavior. So nobody chooses mental illness. It chose them. It was genetically predisposed. It was triggered by an environmental stressor that negatively altered their internal biochemistry, impairing the brain's ability to function, and it shows up externally in behavior. So, not once did my children ever come to me and say, "Hey, dad, I want to try on this mental illness. I've heard about this. I've learned about this. I think it might be a good fit for me." They never chose it. It chose them. And so I didn't ever choose it. It chose us. And so it showed up in our family, and all of a sudden we had to learn, what is this? What's going on here? What's happening in our home? And as we walk that road and that path, it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult and very dark at times. My desire in becoming a certified peer counselor, in being a mental health coach that consults other people, is I want to be a voice of hope and help to others that find themselves in that place where they're saying, "I don't know how to navigate this. I don't know what to do." And I remember those early days. I remember being in a similar position. And so, as a certified peer counselor, we lend our lived experience to speak hope and to offer help to others as they're facing the challenges of mental illness.
What were some of the lessons that you learned while being a mental health coach and helping other people while they've been learning how to navigate their own stigmas and own issues?
Yeah, that's a great question, Will. I think that one of the lessons is that I'm not as alone as I felt at times that I was. I simply had not found my tribe, my group, my people. And one of the best places that I have found where there are other individuals with like experiences that are walking this path of mental health challenges, and what does that look like to live well with our family members and our friends who may be experiencing them. One of the best places I found for support is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI is the nation's largest grassroots organization that provides free education, free support groups, and free advocacy, both for the individual experiencing mental illness and those who are in loving relationships with them. So, one of the lessons was I really wasn't as alone as I felt I was. I just hadn't found my people yet. And so, let us be a voice of hope and help here this afternoon and letting people know one of the great resources that they may not be aware of, where they can find that help and support. Find a group of people that aren't going to shame you, they're not going to blame you, they're not going to judge you, is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And they have affiliate offices across the nation, every state, different counties within each state. So go to NAMI, NAMI.org, and you'll be able to find them there. So you're not as alone as you may feel you are. You just haven't found your people yet, but they do exist and they are out there. And I hope that you'll find them by connecting with NAMI.org today. But probably one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn, and Will, I'm a little bit of a slow learner at times. Sometimes I have to have things come back around time and again in lessons I've learned, and I have to relearn them. But one of my biggest lessons is learning to live life on life's terms. I think that perhaps one of our greatest struggles, including myself, is that as people, we want to maintain control. We want this sense that we are in charge, we are in control, and we work very hard to manage matters in our life so that they are within what is an acceptable, peaceful, productive life as we so desire it to be. But what do you do when life is all of a sudden going sideways on you? You didn't choose this. You had you really did nothing, but all of a sudden this just showed up. It was thrown in your lap. Here it is. And now you're in crisis and you're trying to figure out what to do and where to go. And I have had to really learn to live life on life's terms. And probably the best way that I could illustrate that in this quick moment is one of the places that I really enjoy going to is to the ocean, go to the beach. And we spent many years living by the Pacific Ocean. And so we would go there often. And many of the entrance points to the beach, they have these signs that say, warning, rip current. When in doubt, stay out. And what they're talking about is these currents in the ocean that you're wading out into the water, you're enjoying it as the waves are washing over your feet and maybe, coming up to your ankles or your knees. But if you're not mindful, if you're not watchful, you could find a sneaker wave kind of comes in and all of a sudden you're up to your waist in water, and a rip current will pull you off of your feet and it'll drag you out into the surf. And it is a powerful current. It is a powerful effect that it has. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, how strong or how weak, how skilled or unskilled you are. A rip current will take anyone off of that shoreline and drag you out into the surf. And now all of a sudden you're in a fight for your life. So what started out as a sunny, fun, beautiful day at the beach is all of a sudden a fight for your life. And this is what many people may feel like is happening when they're in crisis in their life. Some crisis has shown up, suddenly swept in on your life, and you're feeling pulled out to the sea and little to no control. And living life on life's terms means that when you are suddenly pulled off the beach and you find yourself being pulled out into the surf, you've got a moment to make a choice. Now, instinctually and naturally, what most of us do when we're in crisis is we swim as hard as we can, as long as we can, as fast as we can, directly against the current, trying to get back to the beach. What they tell us is that most people who die along the Pacific coastline due to being caught in these rip currents, they don't die because they don't know how to swim. They're not dying because they didn't give their best effort. They're not dying because they weren't strong enough, didn't try hard enough. They die from exhaustion. See, what they did was they swam instinctually as long as they could, as hard as they could, directly against the flow of the current that was pulling them out to the sea. But that current is bigger than them. And what you and I find, Will, is that sometimes life is way bigger than we are. There are things that will hit our lives that are just out of our control. We did not create them, but we're caught in the middle of them. And we have a choice in those crisis moments. Are we going to exhaust ourselves and risk drowning in life? because we're trying to fight the flow that's bigger and stronger than us? Or are we going to save ourselves? How do we do that? They say that you survive a rip current by swimming parallel with the problem. So rather than swimming directly against the current that's bigger and stronger than you are, no matter who you or I, no matter what our skill is, if we will choose to surrender to the flow. Now, this is counterintuitive because everything within us wants control. To survive, I've got to give up control. I've got to surrender to the sea. I've got to surrender to this current, and I'm going to swim parallel to the problem. Eventually, as you swim parallel to that current, you'll pull out of the rip current and you'll begin to head back towards shore. But if you swim as hard as you can, as long as you can, directly against the flow, you're going to exhaust yourself and you'll die from drowning because of your exhaustion. And there's a lot of people that's what's happening in life. They're
So,
they're swimming as hard as they can against life rather than living life on life's terms. Swim parallel to the problem.
so Tony, there's a few things that I was thinking about while you were talking. Because the initial question I asked you, what did you learn from this? And then you went into the rip current, and then people would change. One of the problems that I've seen is that the familiarity or our homeostasis when we're in a toxic mindset, it is very scared or nerve-wracking to be able to move into another area. And now trying new things up to this point, that's where the crisis points can start to happen because we are taking away the familiar, the predictability. And when I think about the crisis moments, when we spend our time actually understanding how we live life, one of the things that helped out other people was by calling 988 with them, learning how to advocate for themselves with their partners or their family members. When you are working with these individuals, how do you help them navigate being unsure with the not normal processing of thinking about re-challenging their way of thinking and saying, "Hey, it's okay to be able to live up to this point, but now you're trying to get here. How does this look like to you?" And how you're able to self-soothe when you feel like you need to panic because it's not familiar.
Yeah. It's really difficult. I would agree with you, Will, to try something new, different, go in a separate direction than perhaps what we've done before. And I think that as certified peer counselors, as a mental health coach and consultant, what I help people do in leveraging my lived experience is I connect relationally with them. That their ability to try something new, to look at a different approach is really going to be much more effective if there is a relational connection.
Hmm.
It's not a finger pointing that says, "Will, here's what you need to do." Because we get lots of finger pointing in life where people tell us what to do. And so as a mental health coach and consultant, what I do is I come alongside of and build rapport, build relationship with this individual so that out of that trusted space of human connection, there is an openness that perhaps some of the possibilities that Tony has presented to me, perhaps these might be something for me to consider as well. But as a coach and consultant, I'm not directional. I'm not telling people, here's what you must do. What I am doing is creating connection on a relational basis that establishes trust, opens them to consideration where I present possibilities, present options, present ideas. But there's a difference between giving people direction and sharing information. What I like to do is share information. And it's kind of like going to a party. The holidays are quickly approaching, and some of these parties you go to, they've got big platters of appetizers, and those platters of appetizers often have more than one choice. It's not, hey, here's a appetizer. It's here's some appetizers. Which would you like? And we get to choose which of the appetizers we want to have. And so they're not serving you the appetizer and saying, "Will, this is what we got. It's all we got. You got to take this." They're saying, "Hey, we have some different appetizers here. Which would you like?" And so I view my relationship and working with people as presenting a platter of appetizers. It's a platter of possibilities. And they get to decide which of those options they're comfortable navigating towards. But through it all, my encouragement is that they would relinquish themselves to the sea of struggle, and rather than swimming directly against it and exhausting themselves, and professionally, we call that burnout in the workplace. Personally, when a person is completely burnt out, completely exhausted, it starts showing up and severe depression and other displays of mental health challenges. We want to encourage people that they don't need to struggle against the sea. Relinquish yourself to the pain and the problem. It's bigger than you. But if you'll choose to swim parallel to it, and you start considering your options, possibilities, those that you're comfortable accessing and taking advantage of, you're going to make it back to the beach.
So, Tony, I'll ask this question because this has happened to me, but then it's also happened to quite a few other people I've worked with, where it's like, you're telling me there's these options, but how am I supposed to trust these options? You could say give up yourself to control, but I've been doing this for a while. I've been struggling for a while. How am I going to trust you to or trust the system to protect me? Meanwhile, a lot of times our parents weren't the ones that are able to protect us. So kind of like I don't want to say you're selling, but what kind of narrative do you help people realize that it's okay to allow ourselves to feel, allow ourselves to connect to these things?
Yeah, I think that this is really where supportive relationships are so critical, that it is difficult for us to trust. We're living really in a culture today that has the lowest levels of trust. We don't trust government, institutions, agencies, workplaces. There's a very low level of trust. So I agree with you, Will. That's a barrier in people navigating towards the help that they need. I believe that what really helps people move forward in trusting that the options and the possibilities that may be shared with them in an informational manner rather than directional, that their ability to move forward is it's done in community. It's done with the support of others in relationship. I think I mentioned to you when we were talking the other day, one of my favorite thoughts of Brene Brown and her research is that out of all the research she did in talking with people that had experienced incredible hardship in their life, and yet they were able to be resilient and bounce back and overcome, what was found was that rarely does a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. We need human connection. And so someone's ability to trust, someone's ability to take a step forward is really hinged on the supportive relationships around them. Do they have them or don't they have them? Sadly, we're living in a culture that's very high tech nowadays, and it's extremely low touch. High tech, low touch, not a lot of relationship. So we've got to find our people. We've got to find supportive relationships. And for myself, and you and others, we're giving ourselves to being voices of hope, being voices of help. We want to create that connection that maybe I can't make this matter completely better for this individual. It's it's not that I'm going to fix the whole situation for them. What makes it better isn't my ability to fix it or to bring it all together in a beautiful box with a bow on top. What makes it better is connection, human connection, relationships. And so finding those supports is what helps nudge a person forward in trusting that they can consider their options and perhaps choose some of those options.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe that I was sharing this with you the other day. The way I understand it, especially with a lot of technology, is considered the toxic mimic. It makes us feel like we're more connected more than ever, but if anything, is leaving us more drained than ever. It's how it's sucking the life out of us, and we're not able to fully feel it. And especially after COVID, where they started to remove the physical touch off the table, and how that has actually really implemented this negative, adverse way of thinking. And they were talking about one of the best ways to help people feel connected is that gentle touch. It is just that gentle, hey, put your hand on the shoulder or touch the wrist or the hand, say, yeah, I got your back. I'm going to save you. I don't want to say I'm save you. I'm here with you. And I know you like Brene Brown, and I think about that short little video where empathy versus sympathy.
Yeah.
And with the technology, I feel like there's a lot of sympathy. This is happening to you. Where the empathy is, yeah, this is happening to you, but I also understand I'm here with you. I'm gonna
Mhm.
help you. I'm gonna hold this light while you're in this hole instead of it sucks to be in that hole.
Yes. And sympathy not only fuels disconnection, but it creates a victim mentality. And, one of the concerns I have, Will, is that we have a lot of people that are falling into the victim mentality rather than building resiliency skills, one of which is learning to live life on life's terms. One of which is learning to surrender to the sea and swim parallel to the problem rather than against it. We're, we're not doing as good of a job, in my humble opinion, of building resiliency skills as we are throwing our hands up in the air and crying victim. And it's not that things don't happen to us. That is true of everyone. Stuff happens and it happens to us and we didn't choose it and we didn't cause it. We're just in it. So we have a choice in that moment. Am I going to be the victim, or am I going to build resiliency and the skills to bounce back when life gut punches me? Because
Hmm.
it's not a matter of if life is going to punch us, it's just when. And when it does, who's going to be with me and how am I going to respond?
Like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I do agree with what you're saying about how we all have a plan about how we're going to navigate this. And going back to the crisis or the way you talked about the undertow. So I grew up on the East Coast over, and I used to go over to the Atlantic Ocean. And you plan for the, actually, I'll say this too, is like you're planning for it. You understand that it's there. You understand that this is the risk. You also understand that, hey, you can get sucked out. This is what's going to happen. But if we don't train for it, it's a different perspective. And the reason I will even bring up training is so I get a chance and I have the privilege to work with a lot of veterans. I'm like, hey, you know what? I can feel like we're a little bit high right now. Let's call 988 together. Let's actually have this type of dialogue. And I've built up enough trust with them where they're like, okay, are they going to send the, I'm like, dude, they're not going to send the white coats for you. And we both joke about it because we think we're going to get a self hug for a while. But when we're able to say, hey, you know what? Let's call this number. You're not in crisis yet. You're not in crisis. That's great. Let's actually let you know that this is an option. And if I have a setback, okay, that's cool. I was having a conversation yesterday with Jason Mayo, and he's a certified peer specialist over in Long Island, New York. And he was talking about like he felt this stuff getting triggered. To me, we're going to get hit left, right, and center. But it's also how are we training to be able to use these skills and how do we actually remove all these negative roadblocks like guilt and shame and oh, am I actually preaching the wrong way because I do this? Well, we're all not perfect. And if we were perfect, we wouldn't be in this field. And how do we actually help reduce the stigma is and I believe it's by training for it. Training for the negative, but also giving ourselves grace when we're not able to do everything perfect yet.
And that training takes place best and is most effective when it's done with others, right?
Mhm,
I mean, what we know is that the real key to somebody making progress in their gym is that they've got an exercise partner. They've got somebody who's holding them accountable, someone who's helping them. They're training together, they're growing together. This is the beauty and the strength of Alcoholics Anonymous and other recovery type groups. The real strength and effectiveness of those programs isn't necessarily even their content, which it's great content, but the strength is in the community of connection, it's relationships. So they're training towards sobriety, towards recovery. They are training together towards these positive outcomes, but the success is not in doing it alone. The success comes in finding the support of others. And so that's really my encouragement to your audience today, that they would find support, that they would surrender to life and live it on life's terms, that they don't need to reach this point of exhaustion, burnout, depression, suicidal thought, and so forth, that it is possible to come back when life gives you a major setback that you didn't choose, it chose you. But there you are. And if we had time, Will, you and I both could share stories, undoubtedly, of times in our own life where we got a major gut punch and we were hit in the face and we were knocked down. And my ability to bounce back is based on the support that I have around me that is cheering me on, that is holding me accountable, and is helping me to apply the things I know, I've learned, I've trained for, and I need to implement in this moment.
mhm. So I know we have it for the sake of time. We got about 12 more minutes before you hop off. But the question I wanted to ask you, because quite a bit of the audience are not men, about 50% of the audience are not men. The what have you been able to do, or what have you seen, or even another option? Because I know you mentioned NAMI, but when a person is healing and they are not being as predictable to their partner or their family, what is some of the words of encouragement you would give to the family members that are walking besides the individual healing?
That's a great question. And very quickly, Be mindful that the number one thing that we all are seeking, that we're all looking for, particularly when we are in crisis, is validation. We're not even looking so much for help in the form of information or direction on what to do. When we are in crisis, when we're distraught, when we're experiencing internal emotional disruption and our thoughts are running in many directions, the number one thing that we're looking for is validation. And
Mm,
so what does that look like? When someone is sharing their experience with us, don't dismiss their experience. They are the expert on their experience. Maybe you don't agree with their perspective, but it's not about agreeing. What they need is validation. Yeah, but
mm,
Tony, if I validate them, then they're going to think I agree. Not necessarily. Validation is simply this: you're listening for what is their primary emotion and why are they experiencing it.
mm,
So, a highly distressed individual, it's likely that they're experiencing emotions where they're either mad, sad, or scared. Those are the top three human emotions of someone in crisis that's deeply distraught. They are commonly either mad, sad, or scared. And there can be a little bit of a mix of each of those, but usually one of those emotions is more predominant than all the others. So when someone is expressing their experience to me, I'm not looking to agree with their perspective. I'm not looking to see whether or not I've experienced that as well. It's not about me, it's about them and it's about their experience. So I'm listening for two things. As a family member, as a friend, as a coworker, we all can do this. Listen for what is their primary emotion, being mindful that most people that are highly distressed are mad, sad, or scared. So,
mm.
what is their primary emotion? And then listen for why they're experiencing it. Now, once you've identified the primary emotion and why they're experiencing it, I would encourage you to politely interrupt. We don't have to go through hours of conversation to identify what is their primary emotion and why are they experiencing it. Once we identify those two things, just politely interrupt. I'd say something like, Will, I know I'm interrupting right now, but I'm hearing that you're feeling mad because of, and then you very succinctly reflect back to them what you heard them say. What that does is you've just given them the gift of validation. It's what we all look for in crisis, in difficult, distraught times. We want to know that this person has heard me. You ever find yourself in a conversation where the person's just kind of on a carousel and they're telling you the story over and over again and again, and you as a caring coworker or committed family member, a faithful friend, you're listening to this and you might be internally thinking, my gosh, I mean, when are we going to stop going around in circles here? The reason why they're circling in the conversation is because we haven't validated them.
Mm.
They're looking for validation. So, in answering your question, what can a family member or friend do when they're noticing that someone is in distress and someone is experiencing a crisis or difficulty in their life? Listen deeply to identify their primary emotion and why it's being experienced. Identify that and then reflect it back to them. Reflection gives validation.
So, Tony, the question I was asking is that when a person's healing, and then the person that's actually the caregiver while they're watching them heal, when they're actually trying to support them while they're healing, because what I'll say is that when I started healing, my family members, my friends, was want me to be the same predictable person,
Mm,
but they want me to heal, But since I'm messing with their predictability levels, their normal interaction, it creates this agitation. So, what I was getting at was, how do you actually help the caregivers understand when they are healing? It's a good thing, but to be able to check their own way of thinking when they're actually having this discomfort.
I see. In order for me to be supportive of
Mhm,
someone who needs support, I have to have support.
mhm,
And so there are these shifts and changes occurring in someone who's healing, who's recovering, who's making some positive changes, but as you noted, Will, there's still changes to who we've known that person to be. So to create space and allow this person to evolve and to change, particularly in a positive, forward manner, I want to be supportive of that. For me to be supportive of someone in recovery, I need support. And this is why I would bring us back to um, my obvious passion for connected community. That
mhm,
I've got to have supportive relationships in my life so that I can be a support to Will in his life.
mhm.
If if I'm trying to do this all on my own, I'm exhausting myself in the emotional expenditure that's going out of me as I'm trying to help Will and I'm trying to encourage him and support him. But if all I'm continuing to do is give out to others and
Mhm.
I'm not receiving support myself, pretty soon I'm going to be wore out, wore down. And that's going to create agitation, frustration. It's going to show up in the interactions with the person that I'm trying to support. So, my encouragement is that in order for those who are endeavoring to support someone in their healing and recovery, they themselves also need supportive relationships so that they avoid the emotional expenditure that can lead to personal bankrupt.
Well, for sake of time, do you have any last final thoughts that you would like to give to the listeners that would be hearing this in the near future?
I would encourage all of us that we don't have to be a licensed clinician, certified counselor, marriage and family therapist to help someone. Everyone can help someone. And choosing to create human connection with others, validating their experience, and encouraging them, not by directing them, but sharing information through the platter of possibilities, together, we can help more people. And we can all do this.
Well, I appreciate you, Tony, and I appreciate your time and look forward to exchanging the rest of the information. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Will. You do the same. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you and your audience.